Thank you for joining me today for this video, The Secrets of Successful Learning Transfer, What Adult Learning Principles and Transfer of Training Meets. Ineffective learning transfer is costing us dearly in today's organisations, and whether you're a learning and development professional or you're an external trainer, you'll be wanting to know that the investment in time and money you're making in training is getting results. But what is it that makes learning transfer really successful? And why does it remain elusive to so many? There are three key factors to consider when designing a learning transfer strategy. The first is that learning transfer needs to be focusing on reflection rather than reminding. Let me clarify what I mean. To create a learning process rather than a learning event, often participants are now sent maybe video reminders of content after the event, or some form of additional reading matter after the event to solidify the information that they've learnt. They might also be given little summary check cards that they will have in their pocket to remind them of the key principles. But to think that this kind of reminding people will help them create long-term behavioural change is foolish. Why is this? Well, quite simply, you can't remind your way into behavioural change. How do we know this is the case? Well, it goes back to the adult learning principles developed by Kolb. Let's consider the Kolb model. We'll have the activity, the experience, the reflection, and then the change. So back in the workplace, the activity and the experience will happen anyway. It's part of the day-to-day role. But the key is capturing the reflection, which will then lead to more change. So this is the fundamental principle. Reflection is key back in the workplace. This is such a fundamental point that I've made a complete video about how you can keep your reflection effective in transfer of learning by making it specific, structured and accountable. But more about that for another time. Today's main takeaway needs to be that it's about reflection, not reminding. Secondly, when designing a transfer of learning process, we need to consider whether you're going to have a group process or a one-on-one process. Group processes may seem to be more cost-effective, but I'd question whether we actually get the results. Often in group processes, it's a facilitated discussion and it's very good for problem solving, but the challenge in groups comes down to holding people accountable. Often people think that it's the other people in the group that need to change, or they see the issues that other people have but don't take ownership for where they need to make changes. Accountability is difficult in groups because of groupthink. It can also be a little bit like the difference between going to a group training session or a personal training session where you're working one-on-one with a fitness trainer. In a group session, people can hide, they don't push themselves as hard, and they don't often get the changes that they would get if they worked one-on-one and were truly held accountable. So this brings us on to the third major consideration when designing a successful transfer of learning process, the role of the manager. Everyone knows that the manager has a very important role in the transfer of learning, but it's often difficult to execute, or certainly to get the manager to execute in this role. And I think this is partly because of the lack of skills and tools that managers have in this area. One of the general misapprehensions that managers have when faced with trying to help people on their team transfer the learning from training programs is that because they don't know the content intimately, they think they can't support in the training. Realistically though, to hold a reflective conversation, you don't really need to know the content. I also think that managers are trying to have follow-up conversations but maybe don't get the results that they think they should and therefore are disillusioned. Even a good manager at the moment might have a conversation that maybe goes something like, the manager might say to the participant, "So tell me, how did you find the training program?" "Great, I loved it." "What did you learn? What were your key takeaways?" And they might actually have a good conversation about what happened on the training program, but is that conversation holding someone accountable to change? Highly unlikely. Frequently, the conversation is tacked on to the end of another meeting or is just sort of slid into a busy agenda. It's true that the manager also has an important role at the beginning of the process to help create successful learning transfer at the end. But equally, the time that they put in at the end is very, very important. And actually, if we think back to Kolb and the adult learning principles, with reflection being the key, we have to ask ourselves, do the managers have the skills currently to hold effective reflective conversations with their people? So skills are important for managers to have in transfer of learning, and also it's important to have for them to have tools available to help them hold the reflective conversations. One such tool is a reminder system where the outcomes of conversations can be captured online and copied into the manager and the learning and development person taking ownership of the program. Would also give them an outline to follow within the conversations. This way, we know that the conversations are taking place, we know what the outcomes are, and everyone is kept in the loop, circulated with the information, keeping the ownership with the individual for change, but keeping everyone in the conversation. Ideally, this happens at least 3 times after the finishing of a learning intervention, and probably over about a 2-month period, giving time for changes to be observed and actions to be implemented. In this process, the manager then becomes much closer to the outcomes and to observing the changes that's taking place, whether they're the person actually having the reflective conversations or whether they're being kept in the loop by being advised of what the actions are and having regular communication with their participants and the people that work for them. Consider who within your organisation is the best person to be having these reflective conversations to support change. It might be the manager, it may be a mentor from within the organisation, might be someone from the internal training team or an external person. So you know now that crucial to effective learning transfer is having adult learning principles embedded in the heart of your learning transfer strategy. To find out more about effective reflection, tune into my other video, Reflection and What It Means for Transfer of Learning. And do make sure you've visited our homepage and signed up for regular updates where we will keep you in the crucial transfer of learning conversation loop.